Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. As I film this, it's Halloween, so happy Halloween to everybody, and I hope you're having a lovely day. I am going to do a Friday reads today, so basically I'm going to talk about the books that I've finished since I last did a video about that. I'm going to talk about what I'm reading at the moment. I'm going to talk about the books that I got for my birthday, because it's my birthday on Monday, so 3 days ago. So I'll start with the books that I finished. The first book that I finished was for Victober, and that was A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And this was the prompt for Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. It was her Victober prompt, as she was a big Sherlock Holmes fan. This book was on Audrey, which I was sent a code for Audrey to get a free copy of this book. But as I've said in my last video, Audrey is a really lovely way to read classics because it's an app which gives you extra information. So at the end of each chapter, there's a character guide, there's plot summary so far, there's some extra information. It might be a fact or a little audio clip or something to do with stuff that's mentioned in that part of the book, which just gives you a little bit more depth and understanding of the setting or the time period. And so it was a really, really lovely way to listen to this story. This was my first Sherlock Holmes, and A Study in Scarlet is basically about a man who's found murdered in an empty property in London, and he's American. And the only strange thing is I was really enjoying the first part of the book. Then it spends a whole big section in Utah, which I wasn't expecting at all. And I definitely didn't enjoy the Utah section as much, but you need it for context. And I was glad when they got back to Victorian London again. So I think that this isn't normal practice for Sherlock Holmes. And I am looking forward to reading some more. I'd quite like to read them because that's the first one, and it's how Holmes and Watson meet, and I'd quite like to read them in order, although I don't know if it really matters. Maybe if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, you could tell me whether it matters at all once I've read the first one, or whether there's kind of any story that runs throughout the books. I don't know. So that one, I think I'd probably give that about 3.5 stars, that one, because like I said, I didn't enjoy the section in Utah as much. After that, I finished the second A Court of Thorn and Roses book, which was A Court of Mist and Fury, and I feel proud of myself because I made progress in a series. And if you watch my video about series, you know that I am a serial starter of series, and I'm really hoping to make progress on lots of series over the next year. And so yeah, I did some, which is good. I'm not going to talk about my thoughts on this because I'm doing it for a reading vlog of my top 5 highest rated books, and so I won't talk about that, but I did really enjoy it. Then after that, I finished an audiobook. Just to say, I've got this is a tangent. I'm a tea fan, like most people on booktube, and this tea is Snowball from Bird & Blend, so it's one of their seasonal teas. It's a black tea, but it's flavoured with like marshmallows and jam kind of tastes, and it's so good. Oh, it's got coconut in as well, and I find that with teas that contain coconut, they're my absolute favourites from Bird & Blend, so I would massively recommend this. I'm just going to have some before it gets cold. So I finished an audiobook which was Behind the Scenes at the Museum by Kate Atkinson, and this was read by Susan Jameson, who is one of my favourite narrators, which, as I mentioned in my last video, I used to listen to her read audiobooks on cassette tape when I was a child. She used to read the Catherine Cookson books, and me and my mum were obsessed with Catherine Cookson audiobooks when I was a kid, and so that was a lovely bit of nostalgia for me to listen to that. So it follows a gal called Ruby Lennox, and we get to know Ruby from her moment of conception. So the initial narrative that she's giving us is from the uterus, and then throughout her life we see her story. She lives in a pet shop, so her parents, Bunty and George, run this pet shop, and she has some sisters, and Bunty, her mum, is quite unhappy. She never really wanted to have children, but women didn't really have choices about that so much in those days, because this is set, Ruby's born in the early 1950s. And so very much the expectation was that women would get married and have children. And once the women were married, their whole lives basically revolved around housework and cooking. So Bunty is quite resentful of this, and she doesn't really show much affection towards her children. But then we also go back in time through footnotes, and we hear a bit about Bunty's childhood, Bunty's mum and Bunty's grandmother. And there's a little bit set around the early 1900s, and the First World War is touched upon as well. And I feel this was Kate Atkinson's first book, and I feel that I can feel the seeds of Life After Life developing in this book, because some of the ideas that are touched upon are ones which I think that grew over time and turned into Life After Life. So there's no rebirths and all of that kind of thing in this book, but I can just sense the early seeds of Life After Life. And so it was a really lovely story. So they live in this pet shop. Like I said, Bunty's unhappily married. George is not a faithful husband, and so it's quite a difficult childhood for Ruby and her sisters. And they have their own share of tragedies. They have poor decisions that they make, and how that previous generations making poor decisions, how that impacts on future generations and things as well. So I really enjoyed it. I think initially I was listening to it in quite small sections, and then as I got further through the book, I managed to listen to it in quite long sections. And I definitely found that when I was listening to the long sections, I got a lot more into the story, which is probably the case for most books. So I'd end up giving this one a 4-star, because I thought it was a solid 4-star, and I really enjoy Kate Atkinson's writing. And then the next book that I finished was my book club choice, which I never would have picked up in a million years, but this was None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. So I know that she is a very popular crime writer. I think she's got about 20 books out, and I don't read crime. I was talking to Aaron from Aaron Read a Book, and told him I was reading this, and he was like, that looks like supermarket trash. I was like, yeah, it does. And I don't think they do themselves any favours with these covers, to be honest. But anyway, I was pleasantly surprised by this book. So it is following two women. So Alex is a woman who does a podcast, and she lives in London with her husband and 2 children. She sounds to be quite attractive and fashionable, and she lives in a nice house which is nicely done and everything, and she records podcasts about women's stories, and that's her job. The other woman that we're following is Josie. Josie lives with her husband, who's a lot older than her, one daughter who is constantly in her bedroom gaming and eats jars of baby food as her meals, and another daughter who's run away from home. And Josie is quite creepy, and she comes across Alex right at the beginning of the book, because they've both gone to the same restaurant to celebrate their 45th birthdays. They don't know each other, and Josie goes into the bathroom when Alex is in there and says, oh, it's my 45th birthday too. And then she manages to convince Alex that she wants to make some dramatic changes in her life, and she wants Alex to interview her throughout these changes to document for her podcast. Alex agrees, and then as she lets Josie into her life, she realises like what a massive mistake she's made to get anywhere near her, because Josie is telling lies and she is not who she says she is. So this book, to start with, I could not stop reading it. It was so compulsive. I would like read it in the evening. I'm on annual leave this week, so I'd be staying up late. I didn't want to put it down. And then, as I found has happened with other books which are crime, I thought it just fell flat for me at the end, which I was really disappointed with, because I'd enjoyed it so much up until probably the last 20% or so. And then as we start getting the reveals and we find out what's happening and stuff, I found that I was a bit disappointed, and I didn't feel that. I found there was quite a lot of loose ends, which I think the author had left them deliberately, but I wanted to know more, definitely, some of the answers to the questions. It was one of those books where you go and Google what other people make of it at the end. And so it dropped down to, I think, a 3.75 star. So it was still a good book, or maybe 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. It was still a good book, and I still would recommend it. I just think crime's not my genre, and I don't like it when you think either things get a bit ludicrous or you just don't really understand what happened at the end because it was too open. And so there was quite a lot of things in this book where I thought, but why would they be doing that? Or who's looking after the children right now? Or how is this not being investigated by the police? Or different things that I was a bit throughout towards the end. So anyhow, I would say it was a successful book club choice, and I think we'll have a good discussion about it this weekend, but I'm still not a crime reader, let's just say. The last two books I have to talk about, one I'm just going to really briefly mention because it was a reread for me, and that was Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley-Heller. I can't remember if I mentioned it last time or not, but it was our book club choice for last month, and I have previously talked about it and reviewed it, so I'm not going to do that again. And the next one was one that I'd nearly finished last time I recorded, which is Crying in Hmart by Michelle Zauner. This one, I think I must have given it away because I can't find it. So I think I must have put it in the charity bag that I just took to charity this morning. It's a memoir about the death of Michelle's mum and the relationship that they had while she was growing up. Her mum is from South Korea and her dad is American. And so it's about what it was like for her growing up as a mixed race child, and also about how she doesn't really feel like she always fitted in whichever place she was in. It was about family and grief, and the whole thing that the book was centered around was food, and I love food writing. And I found this book pretty depressing. I found it a bit of a slog, and somebody had written in a review on, I think probably Storygraph, that they felt like it was a book that Michelle had written for herself, like almost a journal to work through her grief. And I think that's a good description. I feel like it was probably a really therapeutic process for her to write this book, but I didn't really find enjoyment from it reading it. I think she can write really well, but it was really depressing in a lot of places, and I totally understand why. Of course, it's a very, very sad thing which happened, but it wasn't an uplifting read. So I would give that one 3 stars. So moving on to the books that I'm reading currently. So I am reading 2 books for my TBR spin, which I'm behind on. So I'm reading Mark Thomas's Belching at the Devil, and I am on page 100. This is about 350 pages in total. This is a book about, so far, the early to mid 2000s, where people in Colombia were getting murdered if they joined, and arrested, beaten up, sacked, if they joined a union in the Coca-Cola bottling factories, and about the human rights abuses that were taking place, and about Coca-Cola's lack of interest and lack of support of its workers, and how they were sort of basically trying to wriggle out of any responsibility or helping. I think we're just about to move to Turkey, and I think that after that we go to India. So it's going to explore globally different human rights issues with Coca-Cola. And it's interesting because this book was written in 2008. It'll be interesting to see if things have changed now or if things are still the same. So that's that one. I'm also reading Frankenstein, again, the disgusting cover, by Mary Shelley. This is for 2 reasons. 1, because it's on my TBR spin, and 2, because it fits with Ugtober, a book with an ugly cover, for Ben's reading good prompt readathon that he's done this year. I'm not explaining that very well, am I? So I'd never read this before. I am about 27% through or something like that. And I think that it's very well written. I think that it's amazing that Mary Shelley was so young when she wrote this. So far, I'm not really that into it. It's fine. It's quite kind of, not scary, but I can imagine at the time especially it was quite like unusual and quite dark. But yeah, so far it's just like, yeah, it's fine. To be honest, if I probably wasn't using it for 2 reading challenges, I don't know if I'd carry on with it. But we'll see. We'll see, it might pick up. Oh, I also just started another series, the final book in the Brown Sisters trilogy by Talia Hibbert, which is Act Your Age, Eve Brown. So it's about their romance books, contemporary romances, about 3 sisters. Each book focuses on a sister. So far, I'm about 10% in. Eve she's grown up in a very affluent household. She has a trust fund, and her parents have basically said to her, look, you're 26, you're just going from job to job without even giving her a proper go. You're not really making anything of your life. We're stopping your trust fund. You need to go and get a job for at least a year before we'll give you the payments back. And you're kind of causing us some they actually use the word embarrassment. And she goes off really upset, and she goes for a drive, and she comes across this place which is interviewing for a chef. She's not a qualified chef, but she loves cooking, and she's just gone in on a whim to go and have an interview at this place which is looking for a chef. So that is the upshot of that so far. So I just needed something that was fiction and not like old and, you know, more literary like Frankenstein. And then soon myself and Aaron are, in the next day or 2, we're starting second in the Boudica series. So I am definitely making some progress on series, which is very good. And then finally, I'm just going to show you the books that I got for my birthday. So these two kind of come together really. So this is not what I got for my birthday, but I'd pre-ordered The Fury of the Gods by John Gwynne, which is the 3rd in the Bloodsworn trilogy, and I'm really looking forward to reading this. I have read book 1 but not book 2, which I own. I'm planning on probably reading book 1 again and then reading book 2 and book 3, because I just want to make sure that I get the most out of it. He has been an absolute legend and written in the front of book 2, and I probably book 3, like a plot synopsis and where all a cast of characters and where they were left in the previous book, which I just wish that everyone did that in all series because it's so helpful. So that's book 3. Now, I had the annoying situation where book 1 was in paperback and book 2 and 3 are in hardback. So I gave my mum a challenge, because she loves a book challenge, to find me a hardback copy of book 1. Because if you look online, some of them are like £200. And I was like, I'm not paying £200 for one book. So we managed to find a copy for £21 of book 1, which is one of my things my parents got me for my birthday. And so yeah, I've now got the whole set in hardback, which pleases me greatly. So I'm probably going to read my paperback version of book 1 again, so I don't get this damaged at all. And then yeah, I can read books 2 and 3. So that's very exciting. And then I also got the newest book in the Court of Thorn and Roses. There's 5 books, well 4. One's like a novella. There's a 3.5 book. So I've read 1 and 2. I've got 3, 3.5 and 4 left to read. So I wanted to get this, make sure I had the same edition as the others, which came in a set. And I'm not going to read anything about the synopsis because obviously it will give me spoilers, so I don't want to know. And then I got 2 books which I've had people really, really rave about. All over booktube, which are the start of a series. Again, don't judge me. Firstly, I got Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I've heard so many people talk about Red Rising and how much they love it. It's a sci-fi series, and just everyone seems to have a completely positive opinion of it. I've heard that the books are that they get better as the series goes along as well. When I bought this, because this one and the next one I actually picked up in London recently, and I picked this one up and this man just came up to me and he was like, oh, you have to read these books, like they're amazing. He's like, the last one's not out yet, so you know, it's like, just be careful, and some of them are really, really big, but they're so worth the effort. Just this customer just came up to me and was like raving about it, and then when I took it to the till, the lady on the till was like, oh, Red Rising, I love Red Rising. So literally I haven't heard anything apart from amazing things about this book, so I'm really excited to start this series. This is about a guy called Darrow, who is a red, and he is a miner inside Mars, trying to bring enough of the products that he's mining up to the surface of Mars so that one day humans can live on the surface of Mars. And then he discovers that it's all a big lie, and Mars has been inhabited for a really long time by the Golds, who are like the sort of elite class compared to the Reds in this world. And I think then he has to fight for the Reds. And so, yeah, that's what this is about. So that's that one. Then the second series that I got was, firstly, I heard Gemma from Gemma Books talk about this and how much she loved it. And then I've also heard the brothers Gwynne, Will and Ed talk about how much they love this series as well. And that is the Joe Abercrombie series, which starts with the blade itself. I think this is called The First Law, the actual series name. So it sounds like it's about 3 separate characters who all have their own problems and they all need to fight each other. So I'm just, I don't know much about this. I just know that it's like dark and there's battles and it sounds like really, really cool. It's blurbed by George R.R. Martin. That's a good sign. So yeah, that's the first one in that series. And then the very final book, which was actually just a Kindle deal rather than a book that I got for my birthday, it was a bit of a gamble. I'm not sure if this is the kind of thing I'd like or not, but it is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather somebody. I can't remember her surname, but I'll put up a picture. I heard about this from my friend Jenny, who has the wonderful book podcast, the Bookcast Club. I also heard Doris at Aldi Books talk about this and love it, and I can see that lots of people have given it 5 stars out of my friends on Storygraph. And I don't really like cozy fantasy that much. I prefer like darker fantasy or romantasy, so we'll see. If it's too cozy for me, I might not like it. I think there's a second book out now as well, but it's basically about Emily Wilde is, I think, a professor who wants to go and, oh, my leg's going numb. This is the bad thing about sitting on the floor. Oh, getting pins and needles on my leg. So Emily Wilde, I believe, is a professor who doesn't really like socialising. She likes spending time with her dog and her books. And she is... Oh, pins and needles. She is going to this place to do an academic study of fairies, I believe. And she doesn't really want to interact with people there. She just wants to go and do her academic thing. And then I believe she does start interacting with people who live there. And I'm not sure if there's a romance. But so we'll see. We'll see if it's my thing or if it's too cozy for me. I will report back once I've read it. So that's everything. This is a lot longer than I thought it would be. I thought this would be quite a quick video, but apparently not. That's everything that I've read and reading and have bought since I spoke to you last. Let me know your thoughts on any of those if you've read any of them. If you want to recommend anything, obviously feel free, or just tell me what you're enjoying reading at the moment. And I hope that you're having a really lovely week, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye!